Good evening. Welcome to the Cortez City Council Workshop Special Meeting. Today is Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021 at 6:15 p.m. I call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is a presentation on request for proposal for City of Cortez VoIP phone system services. IT Manager Shay Allred. Good evening, Shay.
You guys, I assume you guys already got a copy of everything from Linda, right?
Right.
So I don't have to read it to you verbatim?
No.
Okay. So, good evening, Mayor, Council. So we started this process a little over a month ago, trying to beat the end of the year, and we ended up with 13 people that answered the RFP. We graded those 13 people and come up with the top 5, run the matrix on the top 5. We did a it was 36 count line item matrix to come up with the people that we chose, and that was with a whole group of us, which is in the RFP. We'd like to have you guys make a motion or a proposal that we can move forward with High Country Avaya to provide us the phone systems, and we'll move on from there. If you guys can agree on that, then we'll move forward with the contracting and the ordinances to follow. You guys have any questions?
Have we had any interactions with this company before?
No.
First time? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But first interaction was pleasant.
Okay.
They seemed like a really pleasant, good, knowledgeable group of people, and Avaya's been around forever. In the beginning years of my career in the early 90s, I actually did ad hoc at Avaya in Denver for IBM. So I've worked with them before back then, personally, not for the city.
And they're based in where?
Denver.
Denver.
Yeah.
Will they be able to provide service or technical assistance if we need it?
Very much so, yes.
Okay. So how soon would they be able to respond if we have a problem with their phone service?
On the RFP questions that we had, they were literally, I made the phone call and the guy answered the questions.
Okay.
So immediately.
Okay. Yeah.
Shay, or Mayor and Council, Shay, could you maybe tell them about the difference in equipment? You expressed before that this will be cloud-based, and so we won't have to explain that, perhaps.
Yeah. So the way our phone systems work now, the VoIP environment is actually internal to the city. We house and take care of the physical equipment. And the way this works, this was actually be a cloud base. So as long as you have an internet connection, and to provide for that effect, if we ever have to work from home again, there's actually an application that you can install on your cell phone, so that if you're at home and you have to work from home for the city, you can do 4-digit dialing from your cell phone, and it runs through the city application, the city's contract. That's actually routed through it just through the interwebs. And we would not house any of that equipment. That would all be on Avaya. So we wouldn't have to forklift any of that information to the new equipment.
And all the equipment's included in the contract, I guess.
Yeah, all the phones, every single phone in the city would be replaced. And the only things that would actually stay on an analog line that's by federal law is the elevators and I think, what was it? Yeah, security.
Okay, thank you. The one other thing I was going to ask is, could you or City Manager Sanders, would you share the scoring matrix with council as well? By email before.
The whole thing?
Yeah, just so we can make sure. I mean, we're going to be the ones signing the contract, so
right.
So just so we can look and make sure that it's meeting our needs, and that we can look at the process, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I can forward that to I can forward that to Drew in the morning, and then he can disperse it out to all y'all.
Perfect, thank you.
You bet.
Okay. More questions or comments? Okay.
Is this, I got one question.
Go ahead.
On this, is it a renewal every year?
Every three.
Updated.
It's a 3-year contract.
Okay.
That's
so
why-
I was just wondering if it's a,
Yeah,
Did
since
they-
since we're gonna be entering into a 3-year proposal, that's why, instead of just asking for the approval tonight, that's why the ordinance and then move forward. So we'll actually ask for you guys to vote on the final approval on the meeting in January 11.
okay, perfect. That's going to say, so the 3-year part, I was just wondering if any updates come in, and it's with the cost for the updates.
It's all inclusive
Perfect.
up front. Yeah, and the updates are, we actually get notified of all the updates, and we shouldn't see any downtime for those updates. I mean, it should just be seamless because of the environment that we're gonna be put in.
All right, thank you.
So we're replacing the system we have now with this better process.
Well, it's just moving to a cloud-based system, sir.
Okay.
I mean, the system we have now was a really good system. It's just time to move away from it and go this route. It's old.
Okay,
Yes, we need to update.
yeah.
Not as old as you, Orly.
Thank you, Shay, I think. Shay, do you happen to know the difference in cost between what we're paying now and the future? Do you have that on hand? If not, that's okay.
I do not have that exact numbers on hand, no.
Mayor and council, we'll go ahead and provide all that information to you, along with some more explanation on, to put a little more meat on the bones for you.
Yeah.
And do we pay per user, or is it an annual
It's-
amount, or?
It's a license base, and it's, on this one, it's per user per phone. It's just a difference. So, like at the police department, the 10 phones in the patrol room, those are all shared. There's 2 people per phone, so those license bases, it's be per user. And then if it's a actual desk phone, then it's per that phone. But if we have 100 and, what do we have right now, Bill? I think 175 licenses, phone licenses? Yeah, so we have 175 licenses right now to cover the base of the workforce within the city, and that covers conference phones, work phones, at the desk. And the nice part about those licenses is if you have a desk phone, then you automatically have a license for the phone app. So if you need to work from home, it's not split out per how you want to use the technology. It's if every license has the opportunity to use either the desk phone, your handheld, or however you decide to use that. However the city asks you to use that license to do the business.
So if for some reason employees had to work from home in the future, all the employees or many of the employees, it wouldn't be additional cost, that would be already built into the
No,
current
it's already
contract.
built in.
Great, thank you.
And literally, they could take the phone off their desk, take it home, plug it into the internet, and it's just like they're sitting at their desk.
Excellent, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Shay.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is discussion on accessory dwelling units, ADU.
Actually, one quick question, Mayor.
Okay.
Do you guys mind if we move forward with getting the contracts and all of that ready? And you're good with
Yeah,
that?
we're good with that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, next item on the agenda is discussion on accessory dwelling units, ADU, City Planner Tracy Hughes. Good evening, Tracy.
Good evening, council.
Good evening.
So accessory dwelling units are kind of a hot topic out there. They're basically small living units that are an accessory use to an existing single-family residence. the concept allows the small living unit, and it's defined so that it is not triggering a density limit. So these would not be like two separate single-family residences. That's why they come with standards that limit their size and scope. And our land use code right now is fairly restrictive, so I often get questions about putting in an accessory dwelling unit, but almost no one ever follows up on that. We don't get the application in so that these folks can do the accessory dwelling unit because of the restrictions of the size mainly. Right now, our land use code restricts them to 20% of the size of the main unit, and so houses in Cortez aren't particularly large, and so you know, a 2,000 square foot house, you could have a 400 square foot accessory dwelling unit, which would be an appropriate size, but anything less than that, it's not a big enough unit. So the Planning Commission did discuss this a few years ago when we were talking about various topics with the land use code, and I attached the minutes of that discussion so you could kind of see where that, you know, their direction was going and how we came up with the attached proposed standards. And they discussed this at the last two Planning Commission meetings back and wanted to have a workshop on December 7th. So in a week, about 2 weeks, we will be discussing this again, revisiting the proposed language that you have in front of you. So the new rules would allow the units to be 50% or 600 square feet with a maximum of 600 square feet. And again, that's so that we don't actually have two full houses on a lot, because at that point, you know, we are looking at what the density requirements are, because the idea for an accessory unit is 1 or 2 people live in it, not, you know, 6. So the other changes would eliminate the occupancy limits. So in this situation, we would not require the main unit to be occupied by the owner. We also took out the 1 or 2 people part, and I think that may have been because we talked about a couple having a baby, and are we really gonna slice it that explicitly? So those are just things to think about. And the units would be okay in any configuration, so whether they're attached, whether they're a basement, whether they're stairs to a unit over the house, they're in a garage, in a back building, you know, none of those are being, all that's on the table. So the units could go in kind of any building on the lot, as long as they don't exceed the size requirements. And something else to note, that, you know, if we increase the size requirements, the way the code is written, it says whether it's a conversion or not. So one of the kind of situations we run up against is people come in and want to convert an existing 800 square foot garage, and so because it's already there has been some permission granted to do that. And so that's a little bit of a slippery slope, because you could build an 800 square foot garage and then come back 2 years later and say, well, I want to convert it to an accessory dwelling unit. And if we're gonna waive that requirement, there should be criteria in place for that waiver, and that's not currently written into what you see before you. One approach is that it's a hard and fast rule, you can't go over the 600 square feet. The other approach would be if you feel there's an actual hardship that would cause someone to be able to get a larger than 600 square foot unit, then you could write specific criteria so there's some consistency in granting that request. So that's all I have to kind of present on the topic. If you have any questions or would like to discuss.
I have a couple of questions. Just in terms of like the setbacks and, you know, in reading through this and the size of the lots, like the frontage size is what, like 50 feet or something like that currently. Ultimately, is this going to create a lot more work for the city in terms of approving and making sure that all of these, is it like an additional layer? Let's say that everybody, you know, decides that they want kind of a rental in their backyard, which according to this would be allowed. What's your take on that? Would it impact the city staff significantly, potentially, or no?
It could. I don't have exact figures, but I do understand that when Durango kind of adopted their rules, that they did have they kind of gave people a window of time to legitimize existing accessory dwelling units that weren't on the books, and so they did have a huge stack of applications. And here, we might not be looking at that necessarily, but I think people might kind of be seeking to do this all at once. The way this is proposed, it would still be a conditional use permit, so they would still have to pay the application fee and go through the planning commission and city council to be approved. And that process would verify that it meets all the standards and also wouldn't impact the neighborhood. And that, maybe this should just be a permitted use if you meet the criteria.
Yeah, that's kind of my second question really is around, I was shocked to find out that, my neighbors had been running like a little VRBO kind of a situation in their backyard. And I had no idea that was the case. So, strangers in and out every few days. Is there any sort of thing on the books in terms of like, we need to notify the neighbors that, this unit behind their house is currently being used as a VRBO. It's separate from the house. It's currently being used as essentially an ADU, I would assume. So is there anything that's out there for that?
So if it's a conditional use permit, then if we kept it that way as proposed, the application would trigger the need for an adjacent landowner notice. So before it went to planning commission and council, there would be letters sent out, which would notify people that they were proceeding forward with that accessory dwelling unit.
My question was around it being conditional as opposed to permitted, just because I know one of the issues that we're looking at is the lack of available housing in Cortez and in Montezuma County as a whole. So my question was around making it permitted, or even making it permitted specifically for a long-term rental situation, something like that, where you're kind of incentivizing the market to have people build rentable long-term housing. Is that something that you could bring up with planning and zoning board?
Sure. You could put in here the conditional use would be granted for long-term rental only, but then it kind of begs the question of how do you conversely regulate short-term rentals? So that's kind of, where that conversation might have to go.
Well, they are. Short-term rentals are registered for tax purposes, so we theoretically know where all the short-term rentals in the city are. I think it could just be kind of matching a list, and if someone built under a program that was only for long-term rental, and then we find out they're short-term renting it, then we would tell them that they need to stop.
Yeah. So
Do we know who the VRBO people are?
we don't keep a list.
We don't, do we? Like say like a week or whatever, in terms of paying taxes on people coming in using their property, that's kind of like the honor system, right? That would be like a, what do they call it? Not an LLC, but you would file it on your taxes like income, I would assume, right?
Well, short-term rental is required to pay lodger's tax, and that would be, I think, how we would see that.
And council member, by the way, the specific services like VRBO and Airbnb, they charge it for us. So we don't have any specific data on how many we have here. We could probably find out from them, but they collect it on the front end no matter what, and then give that to us.
Are they not required to get like a business license then?
Currently, no.
Is that something we could implement, or is that something at the state level, or?
There is, and I'll defer to Mike here a little bit on it, and we would probably have to get back to council for accuracy. But I do know that in Colorado, there's all kinds of things we can impose or do. I just happened to, before we came in the meeting, look at some taxation on short-term rentals like that for various communities on the our side of the mountains. And, you know, some of them are actually quite a bit higher taxation than just the lodger's tax. So I know there's also other communities who are limiting, and I think Dolores is one of those, who they limit the number of them. So, but there is a lot of things we'd have to do, but that's something we'd have to explore separately.
The two things that come to mind is I'm unclear about sales tax, just plain ordinary sales tax, whether that would be applicable. It's been so long since I looked on a city hotel bill. I don't know whether there's sales tax for that or not. The other question that comes up is infrastructure, water and sewer. Do you run it on the existing, or do you have a new tap of both for the property? So there's some things to clear up, you know, like that. Are they separate utility for Empire, for Atmos? Are we gonna have separate meters or the same, you know? There's some little details like that to clear up as well. These would, if you're short-term, I think it's under 30 days in our ordinance, and if it's over 30 days, it's long-term, if I remember correctly, right?
I don't know if,
That was a definition I remember either seeing in one of our codes or in the state statutes, that's what the difference between the two is. So if you're in there for 35 days, you're a long-term, but if you're in there for a shorter period of time, it's short-term rental, like a hotel room on a vacation.
I don't know that the land use code has anything to offer on that subject. It might be in the city code.
Well, Mayor and Council, perhaps while she's looking there, I think the goal of this evening is to get the will of the council on whether you want us to move forward with trying to put some language together as an ordinance to address this in our land use code, or not.
And this is already in front of P&Z, right?
It's going before P&Z as a workshop session next month. So perhaps we could wait for the outcome of that, and then we can report back to council, first meeting in January.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Approve of that. Any other questions from council? Have you found your base yet?
Yeah, we don't, I was looking at hotel, motel, and bed and breakfast, and none of those are defined.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any kind of, this code probably didn't contemplate this newer use, so.
Okay, so P and Z will discuss this in your next meeting, and you can report back to us then. Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate your coming tonight.
And Tracy, I think that came up somewhere in the context of the hotel down on Broadway that we were having trouble with. They had switched from short-term to long-term, was where I remember, and so somewhere in that is where the definition came from. And I believe they were collecting sales tax down there on short-term rentals, and then when they switched to long-term, they stopped paying sales tax. So that's where that information I just remembered comes from. So short-term rentals might be a sales tax generator for you. Long-term rentals would not be.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Tracy. Okay, moving on. Next item on the agenda is discussion on changing the city logo. City Manager Drew Sanders. Good evening, Drew.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm really coming to you this evening at the request of some of our city staffers who are feeling like perhaps it's time to start a new city logo. The one we have now has been in place since the early 1990s, and to be quite honest, I see nothing wrong with it. However, it has been here quite a while, and I'm just coming to the council to see what your thoughts are on whether or not this should be a priority and we move forward with it. I can tell you that we have one vendor that actually is with our new website, Civic Plus, who says that they can develop a new one for us for about $5,000, which is actually fairly reasonable for what it is. The other costs are going to be redoing our logos on our cars, our business cards, our letterhead, and all those sort of things. So I would venture a guess that that's actually going to be more than 5,000 when we're done. So like I said, just coming this evening and trying to get your thoughts on whether or not this should be moved forward.
You did just capture one of my concerns, is I think that if we plan to do it, we should kind of run our stocks of all of the materials down, and as we're doing it, to make sure that we're not refreshing and just like printing, and then throwing away a bunch of cards with cards and stationery and everything else with an older logo. So that would be one thing, is I think if we decide to move in that direction, we should as a process make sure that we're using what we have, running through our stock, and not reordering until we kind of fully rebrand.
Yeah, agreed. We would want to use a phased approach. Yeah.
It seems like the biggest expense would be all the signs at all of our properties. But I would be in favor of a more eye-catching logo. But yeah, when is the best time to do that?
Can I weigh in on this? Given this has been my area of expertise for about 25 years now retired, but I think 5,000 is a very modest cost for what would happen, but the B part of that is that it's going to be extremely costly to change all of the associated elements, and so I think probably there should be at least some research done, and I'll be glad to offer my expertise in that area. But I think it should be a slow process rather than just a decision.
And there should be some registration fees and copyright fees to protect it, and I'm not sure what they run as well. There was an attorney in Durango did that, and I'm not sure he's available anymore. So but that's the federal trademark and copyright process is also something that could be cost. I don't know exactly what it is anymore.
Do we have, do we know of any municipalities nearby that have gone through this process?
I am unaware of anybody that's changed their logo recently or how they've done it. I can do some checking. I can get hold of CML and find out. But like I say, depending on how secure you want to make your trademark, your logo, whatever you want, that adds to it by registering it with the state and the feds and doing what you need to do to protect it.
Is there ever a slow time, really? Like, I'm just thinking that, if we had an intern or somebody like that, maybe to sick on it, but I kind of have a problem, I guess, putting too much staff time into it at this point, knowing that there are other things that are priorities. I think it's fine. Yeah, of course, it's always nice to have something new, but I don't know. Like, I'd hate to wrap too much staff time up into it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we should look into the total cost of it, not just the establishing the logo, but, there could be a substantial cost. Maybe you could do an estimate on how much it would cost to change every sign in the city.
Yeah. That's I'm just starting here, is whether we even want to spend the staff time to even try to figure that out. So if it's of interest to the council, we will move forward. I can tell you that the more I've thought about it, the more this really is at least a one-year process that we need to go through. And I think we need to time it right in a few things. So to me personally, this is not a big priority right now. We have other bigger irons in the fire, but it's something that we can put in our future plans. So I'm seeing some heads nodding and so on, so maybe we'll just put it on the one-year track and see where it takes us.
That's where I was looking at, staff time. It's a lot of time, like you said, too many irons in the fire going on. And personally, I don't see nothing wrong with the logo we have now, so.
I agree. So, anyway, okay.
Okay,
Thanks, council.
okay. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is general council discussion.
Mayor, I have something that I would like to bring up to council.
Okay.
Just in reflection of our granting process, the workshop that we had at the last meeting. I wanted to say this now instead of wait a year from now and remember it or forget it by that point, but I don't think that the process of having applicants talk during our work session was appropriate. I feel like it was giving those applicants an extra chance to advocate for their request. It is not something that we have written onto the application that applicants can come and advocate for their request. So I just wanted to express that I think it was not in proper form for us to have allowed the two applicants that did show up the additional time to speak. So I hope that in the next year's process, we don't consider that. If they wrote a good application, hopefully we all read through all of them and we've gathered the information necessary to make that determination without additional airtime to those individuals.
I agree with you on it, because it has a different arm twist, and then the other people didn't have a chance to talk either, so I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I would agree as well, and that does bring up something I had thought about, is we may want to work a little bit more on that process, similar to how we work with contracts with basically a scoring matrix. I think that a little more kind of professionalism in the process would be really helpful to us as a whole, as opposed to kind of deciding on the fly. I think if we kind of had a scoring matrix and we could go through and at least start further along the process and then kind of work out the detail from there. But working through a granting process like that with clear goals and specific things that we're trying to accomplish, rather than just relying on, well, a couple people showed up and we're going to kind of give them extra weight, I think would be beneficial.
So if we had additional questions, though, Robert, that would, sorry. If we happen to have additional questions or needed more information, how would you think we would go about doing that?
I mean, in a granting process, there shouldn't be more information. You rely on the grant writer to give you the appropriate information, and if a proposal is lacking the information that you think you need to grant it, I would say that is a sign that maybe it shouldn't be funded.
And that was how it's been done in the past. They weren't allowed to come in and speak at the meeting. It was simply the paperwork in front of you.
Well,
and is what I'm remembering.
kind of. It used to be that we would have every applicant come in and talk.
Right.
About their proposal, and then we would excuse them, and then we would talk about the amounts. So they weren't in the audience when we were talking about specific numbers, but that way, if we had any questions, I seem to recall, one of the things we would, say, like, how did you spend money from the previous year? So rather than, reading it, they could maybe have how it impacted their work with kids or whatever. So it probably was a longer process in that regard, but it was definitely more focused. So I agree having the applicants in the room when we're talking about the dollars wasn't good, but I always thought it was a fairly good process to have those applicants show up, and we would, meet in, like the meeting room, and everybody would just kind of sit and kind of wait their turn, and they would talk a little bit about, their proposal. So that's how I remember doing it for years.
It seemed we didn't do that the last few years, either because the people didn't show up or they were told not to. That's my recent memory. You're right, in the past, it was quite the adventure and quite the time eater.
I guess I would like to be in a more legitimate form, I guess, with this granting process. Like, how many other grantors provide an oral opportunity to advocate for their requests? There was a portion in this application where prior applicants were supposed to report out on how they spent their money. And again, I think if they don't accurately describe how they spent it, then that should influence our decision.
Yeah, well, I think it should be uniform, it should cover all the applicants, not just have a few people speak out in favor of their application.
Well, and one thing, since we haven't awarded the money yet, which we will this evening, but I think we may want to ask for a grant report, not like when you're asking for money the next year, but maybe like June 1st or July 1st, some mid-year, so then we know we're getting grant reports from all of the people we funded for 2022, and then it's sort of a separate process for the actual grant proposals for 2023. And then if we didn't get a grant report or a grant report was delivered late, something like that, that would be something that we would know as part of the process.
Okay, I still am not clear on how, grant or no grant, if we had additional questions that were pertinent to our selection, how would we go about doing that without a presentation at least?
Normally in a granting process, the grant writer has to provide, like kind of blind, you provide the information to the granting organization based on the prompt, and that's it. You get one shot at it. If you as a judge of a grant like that are feeling like you don't have enough information or feeling like you still have some questions based on what they wrote, then I would say that I don't know that you need to give someone the opportunity to come fill in the holes in their application. You just view it as maybe that's not the strongest application. Like, it is just a closed process. So you submit a grant, we look at the paper, that way we're providing an even-handed, balanced opportunity to everyone. We're not offering like, oh, if you rewrote your grant in this way in an oral argument, that would be beneficial to you. You kind of put your strongest foot forward, and if you don't meet the proposal, then you don't meet that proposal. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. But I hear what you're saying. I think there's merit in what you're saying. I still have the big question in my head about if a grant is written and several individuals or groups are applying for a grant, we might have unanswered questions in some of without a presentation. I have no problem with the presentation as long as it doesn't last all night. But sometimes I have questions that I don't have an opportunity to ask because they come up after the information has been put forward. So that's where I'm coming from.
I understand that. I think if we did that, we just need to build it into the grant proposal and say, you get 2 minutes to answer questions from council or something, and then everyone has an equal opportunity. I know a lot of grant process doesn't allow that because there just isn't the time. I mean, let's say we did 5 minutes and we got 17, I mean, we're looking at least a couple hours of kind of open arguments there, or open discussion with all the potential grantees, and we know we're gonna have to make decisions. It isn't like we have an unlimited budget and can just write all the checks we would like to. So I think it makes sense to put kind of a limitation on the process and say, we're asking you to put your best foot forward and give us your best argument in the written grant application. And if it doesn't, if you still have questions, then maybe that isn't the strongest grant application.
Yeah, well, I think there's merits to the oral presentations and the written presentations, but it has to be uniform. We can't just, pick one or have the applicants, show up and give an oral presentation when the other applicants aren't given the same opportunity. So I think we should have it spelled out, either it's going to be oral or written, but not as you wish.
Luckily, we have a year to work on a little bit of procedure, so I might ask if the rest of the council is okay with it, if in maybe June or July, maybe especially if we're asking for grant documentation of how they spent the money, then we could look at that and also kind of do a little bit of process building before we put out our grant application for 2022.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think a lot of good ideas are coming up tonight, pro and con, just discussing, and like you say, we have a year to decide on how to smooth it out, make it equitable. Thank you.
A couple of things just to bring up, just kind of, again, and I hate to be like, oh, look at that old codger historically that was on council 4 years ago, for 8 years ago, 12 years ago, or whenever that started. I was a younger man with less gray hair. I think one of the things is that we gave out more money, so it was a little bit more consequential to really talk to them and have them come in and kind of explain what that was about. The amounts of money that we're giving out, I know nonprofits for sure appreciate them, but in that regard, maybe it doesn't warrant like a big, to-do. But my feeling was, I guess the nice thing about it, and the nice thing that could be, was that it was really a great opportunity to sit down with the people who typically it was like the president of the organization or the director or whomever, and just have kind of a face-to-face to really get to know them well, because, if we're just reading, so-and-so filled out this application, that doesn't really tell me much about the person or the organization that they represent necessarily. So I personally, I really liked the process. Did it take time? Yeah, it took a lot of time. But if I recollect right, we did do it during a work session prior to city council meetings. So we were kind of bound by the beginning of the council meeting. So we had to kind of put a timer on it, I guess.
Yeah, I think Orly and I are both involved in the oral arguments, for the application, and it was quite lengthy, but, we did get to hear the people speak personally, but it is time-consuming, and it is one way of doing it, and the written method is another way of doing it. So we just have to decide, which is the best for our city. Any other comments?
I'll just mention one thing, given that we just were talking about logos, and it's kind of sort of a logo thing, but I was in Montrose yesterday, and I think now anytime I travel kind of semi-local or regionally, I kind of look at things from a different perspective. And I was really impressed with the signage that they have downtown. They just had really clear, large kind of print signs, and it was really difficult to kind of get lost because they were just, I don't know, just, it was really nice. And one of the other things I noticed that I thought about is that the city has that big empty lot that is south of like the farmer's market area. And in Montrose, they had a big sign that said like trailer parking or something like that for people who might be traveling around and needed a place to pull in, you know, that wasn't Walmart. So I thought, you know, maybe that would be something we could do kind of in the short term, just to be like, hey, we have this huge empty lot that literally nobody uses. Like even during farmer's market when it's busy downtown, there's forever been a sign that says city parking, but if we said like, you know, trailer parking for the city or something, I don't know.
So I think Rachel brought this up earlier this year, the city parking lot. But I guess it was more for a different purpose.
Yeah, but I think advertising and letting people use it. Yeah, because Montrose also has maps, and I think that'd be cool.
There's always room for improvement. Okay. Any other comments? I call this meeting adjourned, then. We'll reconvene at 7:30 for the regular, no wait, 7:20. 7:30, okay, 7:30 for the regular agenda. Thank you.